Welcome to the place where the takes are hot and the facts are optional. Where logic takes a back seat and the tangents are unstoppable. It's the show that starts nowhere and still gets everywhere. So buckle up, lean in, don't try to keep control. You're not tuned in to the kings of the Ramble Roll. You're not tuned in to the kings of the Ramble Roll. The Ramble Roll.
Welcome to the Ramble Authority. I'm Jay.
I'm Alan.
This is the show that starts nowhere and goes everywhere. So, Alan, go ahead and get us kicked off this week.
All right, my first point this week is I'm going to talk about a movie that I think gets severely disrespected. It does not get the props it deserves. And ladies and gentlemen, I am talking about the 1993 box office bomb, The Last Action Hero. And so here are my points. This movie was ahead of its time. It was in 1993, and it was really undone because it opened the same weekend as the original Jurassic Park movie opened. And I think people were expecting a different movie, but this movie was a self-parody. It was great satire. It really embodied that 1980s action movie cliches with the constant explosions and one-liners. And let's be honest, it was Arnold parodying Arnold. It was hilarious. I think if you go back and watch it, that film holds up better today than it did in 1993.
You know, it's been a long time since I revisited Last Action Hero. I mean, it's probably been about 5 years since I watched it. I do remember going to see it. I was a lad at the time, but I did
Me
go
too.
see it in theaters. And I remember walking out of it going, I don't think that was bad, but it wasn't what I expected. And it's mostly the kid in it. I really didn't like the kid, but I got it as a framing device, you know. And I think you're onto something that was ahead of its time in terms of being meta commentary for a genre. Like Wes Craven would do that a year or so later with New Nightmare, and people weren't really ready for that. And then he would come back to it years later with Scream, which was written by somebody else, but was really like prototyped into that. Arnold, I think the reason people rejected it is Arnold was coming off the biggest moment of his career, Terminator 2. And it's hard to understate how big a movie that was, man. It lasted in theaters for a year. It made, hundreds of millions of dollars. And no one thought it would. I mean, people thought it was going to fail because it was so expensive. Last Action Hero poked fun at all of it. And John McTiernan's an incredible action director. He was coming off a string of hits too. I just don't think people were ready for it, you know? So it is definitely a cult classic. I will agree with you there.
So I'm going to say this. They even went as so far as to poke fun at Terminator 2. They
Mhm.
go into the Blockbuster video. He's like, I need Schwarzenegger. It's like foreign films are in the back. No, this guy's action. And then he sees the poster of Sly Stallone being the Terminator. He's like, that was
Yeah.
you. And he's like, no, he was great. That relaunched his career. Here is a interesting tidbit for you. There have only been two movies that Robert Patrick appeared as the T-1000 outside of Terminator 2. One is obviously this movie.
Yeah.
Can you name the other movie?
Oh boy, that's a good one. Where did Robert Patrick appear as the T-1000 again? Did he do that in a Wayne's World movie?
Wayne's World 2.
I
He
thought I
tried to
remembered
go
that.
there and he gets pulled over. Officer, what's the problem? And it's the T-1000.
Okay, I thought it was one of the Wayne's World movies. Yeah, so having only seen both of them once, and know them more for their soundtracks, I think, but and the constant video on MTV. But yeah, no, okay,
But I do think this was a solid film. It was ahead of its time, and I saw it as a kid too, and I didn't like it. But I did. I'm a little bit younger than you, not much, but a little bit, and I didn't get it. And as I got older, and just some of the things that would happen, because I make no bones about it. I love Arnold. I
Mm.
love 80s action movies. Like in my mind, Commando may be the greatest movie ever made.
It's
No,
there are a lot of people that
but
agree with that, but
it is a hilarious movie to watch, okay? But I love this movie, and I don't think it gets the respect it deserves.
you've inspired me to go back and revisit this, so I'm gonna have to do that Maybe tab my friends over at Film Strip, see if they'll review it after all these years, because somehow it's 450 episodes. They haven't done that one. But yeah, so we'll get to that. Well, I'm going to keep on the movie train with my first talking point. And I'm here to tell you people that you're wrong about something. The Godfather is superior in every way to The Godfather 2. All you people that hold that up as, oh no, it's so much better, it's so much better. No, you're trying to make it a thing. Now, I want to say this from the get-go. The Godfather 2 is a very good movie. It's a little bloated, but it's a good movie and it's really watchable. But it has a lots of fits and starts in it. Because it's trying to jump timelines. That's actually the genius part of it, is showing young Vito Corleone come up, and Robert De Niro's incredible in that role, and all those flashbacks, those sepia tone flashbacks, as it were, and you really get to see how ruthless he is. When what we saw in the first Godfather, you wouldn't necessarily think that because of the way Marlon Brando played him, but all the Cuba stuff and the Lee Strasberg's Hyman Roth, the old man with his shirt off all the time, and just this, it's almost too much going on, and it's so dour. And I know it's trying to make the point, The Godfather 2, but to me, it runs out of steam at some point. Really, after Vito kind of rises to power is when it drops for me. The Godfather, on the other hand, never stops. It's a bunch of vignettes strung together. I mean, granted, it's not like your standard story, but it is compelling from the get-go because the cast in it is incredible. And it's amazing to watch people that we now know as like these, powerhouse actors and stuff, who at the time were well regarded in some ways, but Brando was the only one that had any kind of a reputation, and it wasn't a good one at the time. The studio didn't want him, and they didn't want Pacino either, but they did want James Caan. They were down for Duvall and everybody else. But when you watch them coalesce together, you watch those scenes, and the fact that that movie's 3 hours long and it feels like it's 2 hours, whereas Godfather 2 is over 3 hours long and you feel every second of it. To me, The Godfather is superior in every way, because if they had never done anything with it beyond that one movie, everything that happens in Godfather 2, you could assume happens because you see the darkness has taken over Michael at the end of it. That's my point. I think The Godfather is way better than The Godfather 2.
Okay, so I'm going to say this. Godfather 2 is a better film if you're looking at it from a cinematic view. It's a more well done, picturesque movie. But the first movie is more raw, it's faster paced, and it has better storytelling than the second one. The acting was incredible. I mean, I don't think Robert Duvall gets the credit he deserves for being Tom.
Yeah.
He was fantastic in that role. But I will go one step further, my friend. The book is better than both movies. It has better subplots, better character explanations and motivations to their backstories. But I will agree with your main point. The first Godfather blows the second one out of the water. No argument from me.
The problem with the book and trying to adapt the book is it is all the tangents and all the
Yeah.
salaciousness, because Puzo was pretty sleazy at that point because he was trying to make money. The man was desperate, and he'll tell you that, or would have told you that when he was alive. He also writes tomes. This is a man that wrote like a 500-page Superman script at one time. The man does not know brevity at all, and the fact that Coppola cut it down along with his producers and 50 other people involved in that. The fact that they cut it down to what they got for that one movie is fairly incredible. Like it's a good piece of slicing and dicing. I, for one, would love it if and they'll never do it because The Sopranos kind of became this, I think, if they had ever taken that and given it that prestige, like 5 seasons of television kind of treatment or whatever,
Yeah.
and had done the book, it would have been interesting. But so much of The Godfather 2 is not in the book. As a matter of fact,
No,
most
it's
of it
not.
isn't. It's just alluded to, and then they stretched it out and built something out of it. The Godfather is, you're pretty much, if you read it, like the movie goes along like it follows it. It's just in a different order, and the beats are a little different, and there's a lot more people to it. But to me, like the thing that I love about a movie is that when it leaves me with the gap and I want more of it, like I now am curious about these people. I'm going to go read the source material. The Godfather
Yeah.
gives me that, and that again, it's a 3 hour movie, so it's not like it's a small investment, but I feel like my time is well spent with it. Whereas I revisited these movies recently, even the third one, And I don't think that's as bad as people say it is. I'll save that for another day. But
No,
The Godfather is just so good, and it just flies by. And again, it unlike what Peter Griffin would say, it does not insist upon itself. It is actually really good. And oddly enough, it lives in my top 10 somewhere. It doesn't quite break my top five because I will do that another day maybe. But I think The Godfather is a superior piece of cinema. And I'll push back on one thing you said. It is the Godfather 2 looks better because they have more money and they have more technology to use
yeah.
and better equipment. So the Godfather, though, it looks incredible when you realize what they were up against to get it done. They were cutting that together the week before it premiered. And the fact that Coppola, who really wasn't anybody at the time, had the vision for that is impressive. So I'll leave us with that with the Godfather.
All right. All right. So my next point, I'm going to delve into the world of, we'll say capitalism, just to, friends, I'm here to tell you that the 40-hour work week is a scam. It's outdated. Now, first of all, you have to understand how the 40-hour work week came about. You had the Industrial Revolution. You had people mainly working 6 days a week, probably 70, 80 hours a week. So in its time, it was revolutionary. And there was this little guy named Henry Ford. And he told everybody, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay you twice what anybody else is paying. And you do a 40-hour work week. 5 days a week, 8-hour shifts. Now, Ford in and of himself was genius because what he did was he essentially created an economy for his own product. He created workers that could buy his cars, meaning demand goes up, which means you need to make more cars. It was purely brilliant. But the 40-hour work week, as it was consisted then, um, is is kind of outdated, and I'll give you why. We have advancements in technology that allows us to be more productive. And there was a study that Forbes did about 10 years ago, and they found that most office workers are only productive 2 to 4 hours a day, that they waste half their day doing nothing, internet, talking to people. Um, and also, it's kind of based on an outdated system, okay? The 40-hour system was, it started in 1926. It really gained steam in the 50s post World War II. But it also made one assumption that one member of the household could work 40 hours a week and provide an income for a house, a car, maybe a vacation, maybe to send a kid to college. But you had another person who stayed at home who handled the child care, the cooking, the cleaning, the errands. Now, both spouses have to work 40 plus hours a week, and you still have all those other things that you have to accomplish. Um, so I do think it needs to be revisited. I've seen a lot of TED Talks where some companies have gone to 4 8-hour days and they found that they're just as productive because let's be honest, people do waste time. People go talk to their coworkers or they just kind of sit there and stare out the window, all a la Office Space, you know. But I think the 40-hour work week is outdated and it needs to go.
I think in the white collar world, you have a strong point because technology has sped up our productivity in some ways, and we've become good. Some interesting things to think about, though. If you deal with anything that's in the service economy or the trades economy, there's absolutely no way you could cut that down because nothing would ever get fixed or done. You never have anywhere to go to do anything. So that's one rebut. The second part of it is this, and this is an interesting study. I just read this today that male parenting involvement in their kids is triple what the previous generation was for they
Really?
skip over my generation, but for like millennial parents and things, it's triple what their boomer parents were in terms of men involved in their kids' lives. And then it's almost, quadruple what the previous were and things like that. So even with all of that work and all the stuff people are doing, people are more involved in their families than they have been in the past, which I find is interesting. I mean, it's the old adage of you make time for what you want to, and I think people are prioritizing family again, which I think is a good thing. And you make a point too that this was built on a system when one person worked and it ran the whole household. Well, we don't live in that world anymore, and we're not going back to it. There's not unless a lot of things happen that are going to wipe off most of us anyway. So that's not where we are. But I think you're into something that there are more efficient ways to do certain kinds of jobs. And maybe if that's the case, then we adjust some of those things. There could be an argument made for that.
Well, and so I'll rebut with this final point. Okay,
Mm.
I think the real trap isn't necessarily the 40 hours. It's the long commutes, the long Zoom meetings, these things that drain hours and time out of your day. I think you lead to a workforce that is stressed, which leads to higher chronic disease, and you find people who are burnout and they just kind of they go to work and collect the check and do the bare minimum. I think we can just do it better. And you know what it's funny, you know, the pandemic happened and you started all this remote work, and they've been clawing that back. And they're clawing it back because they own these office buildings that have sit empty, that have dropped in value from pre-pandemic levels, so they can't sell them without taking a bath. So when we got these buildings, we might as well make these people come to it. I think there just needs to be some sort of stabilization. I think that happier workers are more productive, and I think we have to come to some sort of equilibrium. And I feel like that's went this way. We got to come back a little bit this way. But I'll end my rant on that.
Well, I'll pick up in similar subject line, and I think one of the things that can make people happier is if they get a little bit smarter. And I'm going to recommend a book for everyone because I've read it twice. I own the audiobook too. I revisit it often. It's a podcast. It's called You Are Not So Smart by David McRaney. And he's got other works, but this is one that I think everyone who, particularly if you're working in any part of the world, but if you're working in white collar world, anything like that, even heck, even if you turn wrenches all day, read this thing because it will change the way you operate first by helping you unwind why you think the way you think and do the things you do. But the best part of the book is that it doesn't sit there and just point fingers at you for going like, ah, you think you know a lot, but you don't really, because here's the real answer. It gives you palatable, practical ways to rewire your brain so that you don't make the same mistakes and you don't keep repeating history. It is an incredible work. And I'll tell you where it started for me. I saw a TED talk of his talking about survivorship bias. It's an incredible talk. I won't steal the thunder of it. Go look it up and watch it. It's worth 15 minutes of your time. And I've reused that a lot of different ways in part of what I do for a living and talking to people. And it really helped me reframe a lot of the way I think. And this was, well over a decade ago. That started me down a path of who is this guy? What does he write about? And I found this book and I blew through it. And I said, I must expose other people to this. I've, lent it out and given copies of it to people. Again, got the audiobook, listened to it on a long trip once. And every now and then I will revisit pieces of it because it just helps me remind myself that we are wired for success, but we unwire ourselves with faulty thinking sometimes or faulty assumptions. And this book will help you overcome that. So I think everyone should read You Are Not So Smart and learn.
Okay, I appreciate that tip. I do want to say this. We've been friends from a long time. You've never told me to read that book, and it feels like something I need to check out. So I got a bone to pick
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. Check that one out. Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to move on to my next topic, and this is controversy. And I'm going to tell you about the greatest sporting event in the world.
The Masters?
What is it? No, not even close. Now, I would love to spend a day walking around Augusta. I don't know that I even care to watch people play golf. It just looks like a beautiful place to walk around. And Jane, so you'll like this because I've gotten you into this world. I am talking about the English FA Cup.
Ooh.
And for all of you who don't know what this is, it is a giant tournament where basically the top 8 leagues in English football, soccer for you Americans, come together and they play until they have a winner. It is just a tournament. It is, you move to the next round and the next round. So you have these giant teams like Chelsea or Arsenal and then you have like these smaller semi-professional teams, and then you have these lower level teams where it's like the guys are working a 9 to 5 job, and then they go play football on the weekend, and they have a team. You get stories like Wrexham, which Ryan Reynolds owns, or Mansfield. They
Mhm.
overcome these huge odds, and you just get these great traditions. It started in 1871, so it is actually the oldest football competition in the world. There are over 700 teams involved in this. Um, and my favorite part of it is when you see like Arsenal have to go play at this little rinky-dink stadium that looks like a 2A high school in Pickens County, Alabama. Um, rebut.
I, well, I'm not going to rebut. I'm going to agree with you because I've really enjoyed this last year of keeping up with EPL and learning about football and the English football system. I realized too that the NBA has ripped this concept off with their in-season tournaments, though to much less effect. I think the analogy would be like, say you took the Dallas Cowboys and you made them play against Delta State for no reason, but not at either one of them stadium. They had to play like in Shreveport or in the Liberty Bowl just because. And you would see what would happen. I find that fascinating, and it just goes to show you how universal that sport really is. So I agree with you. An incredible
Uh,
sporting event.
I'm going to tell you this: the largest upset in this tournament actually happened this year. Okay, uh, Maslow's beat Crystal Palace 2-1. Okay,
Yes.
they're a 6 tier team, and so there's 117 position gap between them and Crystal Palace. Um, the largest ever. Now I know back in the '90s, Wrexham when they were nothing, they're still not great, but people just know who they are because of Ryan Reynolds. They
Uh-huh.
beat Arsenal, but you get these giant defeats, um, and it's just fun. I mean, it's knockout football, win or go home.
Yeah, and somehow Crystal Palace doesn't sack their manager for that. Like you imagine if Nick Saban lost to Harding in D2, he would even with all of his rings, they'd have still fired him. Like, you know.
Well, and the great equalizer. I remember this was many years ago. One team had made a run to like the quarterfinals. They're
Uh,
like, oh, the goalkeeper had to ask the day off from the butcher shop to be able to play in the
yeah.
match today.
Yeah, this is like what the Olympics were like when we were kids, when they were really amateurs still. Like they were professional athletes as Olympians, but they had not played pro sports yet. You know, it was before dream teams and all that kind of stuff, at least in our country. So you really, and a lot of other countries didn't have that either. So you really rooted for it. It was like watching the Jamaican bobsled team medal or something. You know, how do you do that? Well, okay. I'm going to keep with the sports theme here and something that I personally find very I don't know, fulfilling, healing, whatever, is the fact that running backs and tight ends are once again valuable in pro football. In the last three drafts, and mind you, in an era when it is more financially stable to stay in college for high level athletes than it is to go pro for a lot of them, at least in the middle round guys, 70 running backs and 45 tight ends have been drafted in the last 3 years to the professional ranks. Why? Because people are lining up and running the football again, and they're throwing to the tight end over the middle while the receivers clear everybody out. I've seen more I formation toss sweeps in the last 2 years in the NFL. It just makes me feel so good inside to see that happen. I saw a fullback dive for a touchdown. It took me back to my youth. And this is in the NFL. I'm not talking. We're not talking about some school running the triple because they're an academy and they have to. This is pro football again. I think running backs and tight ends coming back in vogue is a good thing for the sport.
It is, and it was kind of predictable. I think we've had this conversation a couple of times over the last 10 or 15 years. You had all these teams getting smaller, faster, quicker, spread offenses. You've had, you know, try to beat people with speed, beat them to the edge. And so, let's just go back 20 years. Okay.
Mhm.
2005, 2006, you still had some solid teams that would line up and run the ball. You had defensive tackles that were pushing 350, 360. You had big ends that might have been pushing, 270, 280. And so these offenses got lighter and faster. So defenses had to adjust. The offenses had the advantage for a while. Well, now defense has gotten smaller, lighter, faster. There's no room in the NFL or even the college game really for 350-pound nose tackle right now. But it's swinging back the other way. Defenses went too far, and some offensive mind said, "Hey, if we line up in the eye and have a fullback and a 240-pound running back, we're going to eat these guys' lunch." Well, now the defense is going to have to adjust, but it's going to take them 5 years to probably create the guys. Like, we've changed who football players are, and it's great to see it go back because running the football it holds a special place in my heart, even though my Alabama Crimson Tide apparently don't know what running the ball is.
They're abandoning their religion.
They really have. It's blasphemy, I tell you.
I'll have to come back to that another day.
It is great to see these guys getting that love again. Because, I mean, let's be honest, running backs were considered useless in the NFL. Like, I'll just go out and draft some guy in the fourth round and it'll be fine. And now it's like, oh, I'm going to draft a guy with the third pick because he's going to be a bell cow. Let's be honest, there's really only been like one or two bell cows in the last decade.
Well, what you're seeing is, and it's a wiser use of the position, is we can platoon backs. We get guys that are either the same guy, and so we just run the same plays in between, or we get the speed back to go with the power back and we mix it up. But you're right. You're seeing, fullbacks, that's still a little niche. Like you see a few of them around and they're fun to see. But what you see a lot of multiple tight end sets. The Joe Gibbs offense has really come back in vogue. And you see a lot of multiple tight end looks and they move those guys around. I'll just leave you with this thought on that before we go to our last two segments here. And it all goes back to one simple thing. And you talked about how offenses got lighter and faster and stuff. This is all still Texas's fault. That Texas 7-on-7 garbage has ruined football forever. And I will plant flags on that hill until I have no more hills to plant flags upon. And I will.
How did we lose that recording? We could have been
it's to the sands of time. But well, we have every week here or every show we're going to do these random topics and things like that. But we do have some recurring segments that we'll get into the third quarter of the show with, and one of them is going to be Alan's "Get Off My Lawn." So, Alan, tell him to get off your lawn.
Well, I'm an old man, as you can tell by the gray in the beard. I have no hair, and so I had a "Get Off Your Lawn" segment. And what better place to start than actually talking about your lawn? So, hot take: grass is overrated. It's a high maintenance crop that requires lots of fertilizer, pesticides, weed killer, and it creates biological desert with low biodiversity. You also have to factor in the pollution that comes from these gas-powered lawn equipment that you have to use to maintain said lawn. And we're not even talking about the runoff of the fertilizer and the chemicals with rain into the storm drains, into the creeks, into the streams, into the lakes, into the oceans and the rivers, and the giant dead zone we have in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico because of all this. Get rid of grass, get you some clover, and you'll be a happy man. And you won't have to cut the grass every week.
And the cows will love you for the clover. I love it. I love it. I'm going to use my recurring segment as a creator highlight of the show. So, going to shine a little positivity, a little light on people that I think are putting some good stuff out there. Before celebrities took over this space from all of us and took over all the attention, it was just regular schmoes, just having a good time and talking. And one of my favorite regular schmoes to listen to is a fella named Phil Walsh from Phil at the Movies. And there's a lot of movie podcasts out there. I know what you're saying, but Phil's a different brand. All right. Phil is all about the love of movies. And if you want to see movies of all kinds, cinema of all brands celebrated, and not just fawned over, but celebrated critically, Phil is your guy. So you can check out Phil at the Movies on YouTube. He's on Apple, Spotify, all the podcast places. Sometimes it's just Phil talking about what he's watching in the theater that week. Sometimes he's revisiting a classic. Sometimes he's bringing on friends. They're getting into a deep dive. This summer leading up, he is revisiting every Christopher Nolan film because the most anticipated movie, probably the last decade, is The Odyssey for Phil. He's really into Christopher Nolan's Odyssey. So if you want to hear somebody deep dive into the films of Nolan from a different perspective, Phil's your guy. So Phil at the Movies, I recommend to everybody. A good friend of mine and just a fun listen to any chance you get to check out a movie podcast. I strongly recommend.
I'm excited about the Odyssey. I kind of wish it was like an HBO miniseries because that is a really long book to cram into like a 3 hour movie.
Yeah.
Um,
But if there's one person that could do it, it's him. So he's modern Kubrick. So I'll give him that distinction. I think the man doesn't miss very often, if he misses at all. So I enjoy the Nolan, and I'm looking forward to the Odyssey as well. Thankful to live near an IMAX so I can catch it in its preferred format. They had to reinvent cameras for this thing. Anytime you do that, you're either artistic hubris run amok or you're a genius, and Nolan tends to be genius. So I'm gonna try it out. So.
you want to hear an old man problem? I don't like the IMAX because it makes me dizzy.
Okay, fair. It will. You got to pick the right seats. That's true. I had a Polar Express experience at an IMAX, and I'm still wobbly. But that's also because that was some horrific animation. Let's just be real. Those people are scary. They're nightmare fuel. So, but it paved the way. So we're gonna let it go. So, well, speaking of letting it go, we've enjoyed it here on the Ramble Authority. You can find the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you find podcasts. Spread the word. We appreciate the support. And hey, if you're listening to us, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. If you're on YouTube, it helps people find us through the algorithm. Until next time, for Alan, I'm Jay. You've been listening to the Ramble Authority.
Welcome to the place where the takes are hot and the facts are optional. Where logic takes a back seat and the changes are unstoppable.